Yeah, this is the May 21st Governance Steering Committee meeting, and I would like a motion for adoption of the agenda.
I'll see you in a while.
Any discussion? All in favor? Those opposed? Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes, please. Diane? Any discussion? All in favor? Motion's carried. Now, we have a section here again, it's called public comment. Oh, and by the way, you're recording again, are you? Do you mind that?
Not at all. Nope.
Any objections to the recording of this meeting? Seeing none? We have public comment. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak to the issues that we have before us today? Jim?
Not I, no, thank you.
Okay, good. Well, without further ado, here's Ms. Adkirk, and we're going to get started. The job is done.
Great, good, thank you.
What, are you gonna go home now?
Go home now. Oh, and excuse me, I'm sorry, and George can't make it today. He's let us know that. Okay.
And I think Jim's unable to be here. I think everyone else is.
So good morning, thanks for having me back. Thanks for coming. I just have a couple of slides that I wanted to offer up, and then I hope that we'll spend the session working, or not, depending on your choice. But I just wanted to sort of say a couple of things about the context and where we're at and where we're hoping to get to. You'll recall this visual from previously. We started in early January, and we get a round of council consultation during January and February. We had our first governance committee meeting with you on February 27th. I drafted the documents during February and March. We had our last meeting in April. I've done some just minor revisions to the documents following up the April meeting, and now the documents are to you in a revised form. We anticipate that this would be my last meeting with you. So that's where we're at. Just in terms of the agenda today, this is my agenda, which is included in your package. I've offered up 3 optional recommendations for you to make to council. One is that you recommend that council adopt the documents as drafted. Option 2 would be that you recommend to council not to adopt them at all, and to just move on and to end this process. And I think if that's in your minds, we should deal with that at the beginning of the meeting, and then we can all go and attend to other matters and not waste too much time. So if that's in your mind, we should bring it up now. And then the third option, recommend that council adopt the documents with amendments. And if you do proceed to make some kind of recommendation to council that you would actually adopt, I might be surprised that there wouldn't be amendments. So that's, if that's the path we take today, then that's what I would hope that we would spend some time discussing. And then I've just listed each of the documents, and I'm suggesting that we just go through them one by one, and then at the end, come back and you would make a recommendation to council. So I'll just let that sit, and if somebody wants to put forward a motion that we, for council to discuss and not proceed with this work, then I'll just invite you to make that motion right away.
I would move option 3.
With amendments?
With amendments.
Well,
Is that what
if that, well,
Okay.
we will, if that's the motion that you want to follow, we could, well, maybe we could consider that now. Maybe that's the way to tease this out a bit.
And seconded?
I'll second it.
Discussion. Council Westwood.
Well, I will follow up Melissa's ask to not proceed with any furtherance of this at this time. It's interesting that if we approve number 3 with amendments in 2.5 to 3 hours. We might have some amendments, we might not, we might have some that are acceptable, some that aren't. So by virtue of accepting the 3, I would completely accept if I voted in favor of this with amendments, which I don't even know what they are.
Maybe I'll just speak first as a motion.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I wasn't trying to speak out of turn,
No, I don't.
if that's the difference.
No.
In very general terms, I have come to the conclusion that there are many valuable things in there, and I only have a few exceptions that I have problems with. I do like very much the public input at the beginning of the session, and for reasons that are fairly obvious to me that public input happens before the vote is taking place. I do have a problem with the limit on the number of delegations that can be there. As it stands right now, it's
I think, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. You're on Elemina's stuff.
I understand. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's big on my mind. Yeah, forget it.
Yeah, there's a, you know, if I could,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I mean, these two processes are running in parallel, and obviously they're
They are coming
interconnected.
with one
Yeah.
result.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to that.
So is that withdrawn?
I'll withdraw.
Okay, so
Motion?
motion,
I'll withdraw.
and a second, includes, yeah, it's withdrawn.
Okay.
Unless there's objections.
So, I'd like to, I get the way of proceeding if somebody said, I don't want to adopt.
Yes.
That we would say that now.
Yes.
And take a temperature reading, but if that doesn't happen, then my preference would be to go through them, maybe amend them as they come up, and then at the end, there'd be a motion saying as amended.
And that's what I'm going to
What's the limit to?
Second. No second. Oh, okay, wait a second. Discussion on number 2.
Well, I would just like to say that we have ample information about our operations, and frankly, the majority of the information is information that we have, and that we're assumingly duty bound to operate under. And it's entirely up to us how we operate within the charter that we already have, and the amounts of teachings and coachings and trainings and informations we have. We have the opportunity through our chairs to be flexible. We, in the last 10 days or last week, learned all about the opportunity to be flexible with our agendas, with taking something off the table if we choose to, with not dealing with a matter or topic if we choose to. However the chair chooses to operate within the charter. So by virtue of now saying to the next council and mayor, here is how you're going to operate now. We already go through these steps and processes, which we already have. And then, based on the personality of the person that's in the chair, how they interpret the charter, and well, I'd like to reset this, or I'd like to take a step back, or I'd like to, if we get something to do, no, I believe on the board. So we all have and know that information. And we all have the ability to do that as the chair. So for me, I think we already have what we need. We simply need to use understand the necessity to make these changes at this time in June, or May, or June, or July, or whatever will officially take place, leading into the next set of nines, 4 years. Here's how you're gonna operate. And we decided that for you. When it's already been decided for us with the charter and everything else we got. So, and the opportunity to have flexibility. The role of the mayor, the role of councilors, the role of staff, we have all this. We have.
Thanks. Diane?
I think that this document, assists us in how to, it's not so much our rules of order, but our rules of conduct. And so I think this is different than the stuff that, this is helping us understand, what our conduct should be at the table, and our relationships with one another, our relationships with staff, which is different. And, knowing when to rules and order, when to, things, motions that one might want to do. So I think this is different, and so I'm not prepared to, refuse to adopt that.
Diana? I don't answer. Me too.
This is an affirmation. I mean, this is the way we have been at the LGBT courses and all the studies we've done through the Catholic course. This for me is more of a review and an affirmation. This is the way we want to proceed. That's the way I looked at it. I cross-referenced as I was reading, and it's all, for me, it's not new. It's good material in the way that we should be proceeding and moving forward. And as far as adopting something before another council comes in, these I think are all always guidelines. The new councils can have, we've talked about having a session for new council members that are wanting to run for council. And these would be excellent for them to proceed forward with. That's before they take the oath, right? So I'm look forward to going through. And if we want to make any changes, we can.
Fred?
Well, I concur with both Councilor Dan and Councilor Johnston on this, and I'm trying to go back in my mind why we find ourselves in this governance meeting in the first place. And it is because not enough emphasis was put by all of us at times, I think, on a whole bunch of things that are being made for the notion, for instance, for one council in the beginning of this term, actually want to use point of order, for instance. Basically was there then on that time, that's not a good experience. Preparedness for meetings is extremely important, and that does not apply to anyone on this council. I have several councillors regularly the agenda changes before the next see them. It is that kind of stuff that all of us know and that we didn't know we should know, but I think it is extremely important to have gone through all of this again, and reaffirm, I think, is very important, particularly when it comes to the end. And it goes anywhere from rolling the eyes to bringing minutes and general appropriate council behavior is reaffirmed. And to me, that really was what set up this whole thing in the first place.
done in its whole role. I mean, I think everyone, at least I expect that everyone, understands why we're doing this. Surely God is not going to come and pull out the blue and say, gee, why is it necessary to review this issue? It's obvious, blatantly obvious, and I just think now to suddenly go through this whole procedure and then say, let's do two, says don't recommend it, we all get up, go our separate ways. What the hell have we accomplished? You know, we put out some good money for very experienced people to give us their best advice on how to proceed with this thing. And to kill it right now is reprehensible. I don't even understand why we want it. But the point is, and others have made it probably better than I can, is that this is something we all know. Everyone at this table knows this. There's nothing new here, but it is just something that we need to review to remember, you know, you didn't do this, you were supposed to have done that, this is the conduct, the code of conduct, and we should live by it. And it's not incumbent on one or two, it's incumbent on everyone, mayor and council, to follow these guidelines.
Just a quick thing too, and I keep reminding myself why we're going through this, and it's all, it's community driven. It came from the strategic plan, and the fact that the members of our community see us as maybe advice at council, council that needs to step up a little bit straighter and step in place and taking responsibility was that part of it, the strategic plan that has caused this whole review. So I think it's very badly very good.
But there's another point I want to make that makes this very important for me as well, and that is the section on the relationship with staff. You know, I have worked as hard as I could since I've been on this council and the previous one to behave in a sense that is also respectful of the work that they do. I may criticize them, but I do it to their face, or ask to see them. There's a sentence in here to not do it in public and so on and so forth. That is not being adhered to. I know of quite a number of examples where that should not be. And while we don't agree with staff, we also very often, and I'm guilty of it myself, we have gotten in council debates, with staff sometimes, and that should not be, that should not ever be. And again, like I said, I've done that. And it's not good and it should be. Another reason to pay attention to this. And where it pertains to the next council, it might have been very helpful if we had something in place when we started, and to reaffirm, and to be absolutely sure about the behavior that is acceptable and so on. I watched other council meetings, I watched Vancouver meetings, pretty often times, but I don't see some of the stuff that happens here. A large council is aware that you have a certain relationship with staff that is at the very least respectful.
Nope.
Is there any first-time speakers who'd like to speak?
Oh, I was just going to ask for a moment.
Okay, I'm curious. I know this is this is my last.
That's it, the last 3 minutes.
So when I do the same spread and watch other, now we're not there every day in others, and if I happen to pick the right meeting to watch, I go, "Ooh, we're not so bad." But if I happen to watch the one that I think that I'm looking forward to seeing, because I go, "Oh, good, they're really parliamentarian and really complicated. Look at how well, oh my God, well, we're not like that." So I don't think that there's a cookie cutter council meeting. There's the rules and roles that we're going to hand to the next be that candid. And Councillor Johnson said the same thing. This isn't any new information from Councillor Johnson. This is information we've all got. They had and received and read, and they've done all those things. We act like buffoons in public at our meetings from time to time, probably. Do we all have our ups and downs, and do we have our, well, hang on here, I need some more information on this. Whoa, 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 this isn't what I understood or was told, or whatever. So if you're feeling that way, are you not allowed to say it? Or it's just how you say it? Or it's just how you present it? And so, maybe this is, from an education perspective, I can apply to take a course on how to articulate my views on things that are different than the way that you articulate views on things, but we should be more the same on how we articulate things. Because, or ask the questions, or we use the verbiage, or dots and commas and hyphens and everything in the right places at the right time with the right emotion. Because that's not who we are. So while we could, somebody's decibel of their voice could be louder than the previous person, and that person was the louder person was said the exact same thing. Their voice is loud. Or that person's way calmer and gets their point across way better because they're softer. But we're not all the same. And every council meeting that we all watch on TV, whatever city we're in, and we turn on that council meeting, I've seen some simple ones, whether it's in the States or Canada or BC or wherever. So, Councillor Johnson said for me, we have this. We have this information. We all get it when we are on, and we all sign off on what our charter responsibilities are. And if we need discipline, the headmaster disciplines us. The principal comes and says, "Swear up, please. Fix it. Don't do that again. Didn't like it. Unacceptable. Inappropriate. See me in the office Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock." That's how I see it. So obviously I see it different than the previous speakers. So that's how I see it. I don't get to speak again, so we know that.
I'm just thinking that if we were to adopt option 2, I don't think it would, I don't think the message of the meaning of that, defeating, I guess, the meaning of it would be that we did not accept those things. And if the reason that we don't want to pass, say, motion 1, recommended that council adopt it, is because we already have it, then I wouldn't expect you to say, let's not adopt it. It doesn't make sense. Then where are we? Are we then left with all of that work that we've all done and accepted up to this point, that we've all had the courses on, et cetera, is now no more, and now we have no code of conduct, we have no agreed upon way of relating with one another and with the community. So I think even for that reason, that we should not accept recommendation or option 2, because I think that it would make null and void all of the stuff we've done that is already in. So that's another important thing.
Councillor McKay, anything?
No, I just think we should just carry on with the meeting and get going. We said we were going to do a strategic plan. Part of it was a governance review. So let's get on with it.
Well, and I think briefly say that it's just sort of like renewing your vows, which is kind of corny. Not a great fan of that, but anyway. But I think at one time this was needed, and perhaps it's still needed. And, you know, it came from our interviews and so on and so forth, and here we are. And it all comes down to enforcing the rules and responsibilities. Someone's got to enforce it. Doesn't matter what we have written down, someone's still got to say, up, up, up. So, to some degree, Council Bestwick's very correct. It comes down to someone has to say. And it comes to maybe us to say, not necessarily the mayor, but someone says point of order. So, but I don't think there's any harm in agreeing with these recommendations. The question is, and I'll read it out. Recommend the council not adopt the council charter, council role, mayor role, council staff relations protocol, and council member declaration documents. That's the motion. All in favor of the motion? Those opposed? Motion's defeated. All right, I don't know where to go from here.
Well, you're already ahead of me, way ahead of me, because I did, some of you referenced the process that got you here, and I did look into that in more detail than I had in the past. It started with your strategic planning process, which as one of the strategic priorities was taking responsibility to be an excellent municipal government. And then you had the Watson governance review, which came out of that initiative, out of the strategic planning effort, and now we're at the governance framework. And I was just going to remind you some of the things that were said. So in the strat plan process, there were community leader interviews, and they were asked the city's performance in relation to key characteristics of an excellent municipal government. Your rating was 3 out of 5. And the suggestions for improvement were recorded as governance, leadership, foresight, catalyst for development, focus on implementing the strategic plan, and then performance management, measurement, accountability, and a cultural shift at City Hall. So all of those things drove, that community feedback drove you to undertake your Watson report. And then the Watson report said, this just happens to be out of the part about the role of councillors. And it said, in order for individual councillors to be aware of their responsibilities to be held accountable for them, it would be helpful to create a written position description for the individual councillors that provide guidance on the councillor's statutory responsibilities, legal duties, and performance expectations, which you can see that I borrowed the language from this report and used it in the materials that I prepared. And they also reinforced throughout their report this notion that council will adopt these. So of course, with reference to the next council, the council has total control to amend them or change them or abandon them if that's what they see as appropriate. I also just wanted to bring to your attention what the Watson report said about signing a declaration, and recommendation 38 was to ensure that each councillor reads and signs an annual declaration acknowledging that he or she understands the content of the code of conduct and agrees to abide by it. So I haven't called this a code of conduct, but that is essentially the intent. Sorry.
Can we just leave it from here?
Yeah, sure.
No speakers. Bill.
Phil.
So when when we're elected, we not sign an oath which is all governing, all encompassing. We don't sign different things to cover different things. So when I say my oath, in which we're important, good, whatever, are we doing that when we sign that thing? Or we have to sign more things, more declarations? I declare to be on time for every single meeting. I declare to never leave early. I declare that I'll always be perfect. Isn't that what we do?
Yeah, so the community charter requires that you sign an oath, and it is a fairly short oath that makes reference to your legislative responsibilities. I think, again, the commentary in the Watson report suggests, based on interviews, based on the research of the strategic plan, that gaps in the knowledge and practice related to your job as elected officials. And that's why they've made this recommendation that there needs to be further detail. And so that's how you got here, right? That was their assessment. I should note too that one of the interesting things that I observed in this process is that you had commentary offered by the people that worked with you to develop your strategic plan, the Watson report, and now me. And I would say that the observations and the recommendations have been happily very consistent. So it is, of course, entirely up to you what you do with that advice or those recommendations. But that's what you have before you.
So are those gaps subjective or objective? And if we ask the next council to sign this, what happens? Who decides whether or not you conducted yourselves according to that declaration? Who decides? And what's the penalty? What's the consequence if somebody thinks that you didn't observe that declaration that you signed on November the 12th, and shame on you, I think that you didn't observe that declaration that you signed 3 months ago.
So these documents address that, right? And there's really two parts to that question, two responses to that question. One is certainly your statutory and legal duties. There are legal consequences to breaches of those. So, you sign your oath of office as an elected official, you are obligated to be in compliance with the statutes and the laws, particularly the Charter of the Municipal Act and other statutes. And if you breach them, for example, with confidentiality, which was clearly an issue in the Watson report and is an area of concern, I assume, for your council. If you are in breach of releasing that information, you are legally liable for that. So there are legal mechanisms to deal with that part of it. The other parts, though, that are not sort of statutory requirements or legal duties, the responsibility, and this is what these documents kind of explore and explain, is it is for council to self-govern. It is only you that can govern your own way of operating and behavior. It's not the staff's role, it's not the public's role, it's your role. So it is the 9 people around the table that need to manage that, and I've outlined a set of progressive interventions that you can make to in one way or another sanction or to address the breaches of conduct. And I should say that this is not, I would say that you are at the leading edge of this, but you're not the only community that has done this in BC. And it seems to have become increasingly common that the council begins to see themselves as self-governing and seeks ways to manage the way they conduct their business. So a couple of other bits of information. When I asked you at the beginning of this process in January whether or not you thought clarity about the roles of council and staff were important to a high-functioning and constructive council-staff relationship, the 7 of you that responded to the survey agreed or strongly agreed that it was important to have clarity. And then secondly, you said that you should adopt role descriptions and commit to them. So 6 of you felt that it was important to do this work, and 1 disagreed with the work. So, those are the messages that you've been sending, and they're consistent with the work of both the strategic plan and the Watson report. And then, just back to your question, Bill, this is a quote from John McNalbanian, a scholar and a former mayor himself from Kansas. He says, in the end, the council must manage its own behavior and seek compliance from its own members. And this is reinforcing this idea that you must self-govern. There's nobody else that's going to do this, right? Your public has told you what they think, And now it's up to you to make these decisions and take on that responsibility. So what you have before you, this is what I'm hoping we'll spend the rest of the morning on. The roles and responsibilities descriptions as recommended by the Watson report. The performance expectations, again, recommended by the Watson report. Some draft declarations, and then the self-governance intervention steps that are laid out for you. And then I just want to make one last comment. And again, I think the discussion that we had right off the bat sort of reveals that you have all thought about this anyways, but there's two ways to think about the sort of problem or challenge you have in front of you. And that is to think of it as a technical problem. It's, you have a leaky pipe, you go in, you replace a bit of pipe, you fix the problem, and you move on. That's a technical problem, easily resolved with a technical solution. The kind of problem that you have in front of you is really an adaptive problem or a transformative problem, where you are hoping to transform into a new way of doing your business. That's a much more difficult problem. We've got these 7 pieces of paper here, and you can adopt them, and they could go sit on the shelf, and that would be a technical solution to an adaptive problem, right? It's not enough just to adopt these. It needs to become part of the way you do business, and they need to be, you need to use them and keep them alive. And I think this is why the Watson report actually recommended that you sign the declaration every year. Might be, I don't know, it's up to you guys what you want to do with that. I was a bit surprised when I read that, I thought, gee, but I think that the intention of that is to keep these documents alive as a reminder, as an affirmation that that's right, this is our role. We are elected officials. We play this very, very fundamental and critical role in the exercise of democracy in our country, and that we need to be reminded of what that role is and how we should carry it. And so I just offer that to you, that this is a difficult problem. This isn't the leaky pipe problem. This is a transformative problem. And that you will have to continue to work on it if you adopt these. And, they may evolve and change from one council to the next. But it will take sustained effort. And surely, this committee has devoted sustained effort to it. I mean, I'm pretty impressed with how much energy you guys have put into this whole process, of which I'm just a little piece. But going forward, we will need to sustain it. And the new council, the kind of training and coaching and support that's provided to the new council will be really critical. So, today's objectives: to consider the options for the committee recommendations, where you've taken the first step in that, and to review and amend the documents as needed, which is seems where we're headed, and then at the end, hoping that we will have a motion at the end of this that you can take to council as a whole. Any questions? No, good. And just, my plan was to literally put each of these documents up on the screen, and we would start with the council charter. This is likely to be a bit of a laborious process, but I don't know any other way to do it to give full kind of value and thought to each of the documents. I just thought we'd go through them one by one, and if there are changes you want to be made, I'll make note of them, and then we'll make the changes in the documents. And if you like, I can present to you two documents, one that actually has a track changes, visual appearance to it, and the other one that is just a fully amended document, just so it's easy for you to reference when it's going to change. So does that suit you? Is that okay? So the council charter, what you have is this piece, which actually comes out of the BC Community Charter. It's really not changeable. The rest of it is all open for discussion. Is there anything that anybody would like to amend or change? And that's, I think it's about a 3-page document. Now we're going to start on the first page. anything on the second page then?
What are you referring to as the second page?
Sorry, in your agenda package, the second page would be page 6. I'll just note that there's a couple of things in this document, things like where I put the community charter that's not in italics, I will make those changes and note that, but there's, when I read through it yesterday, I found about a dozen kind of little editorial things which I'll just make, but won't change any of the meaning. Hearing none, then maybe on page 3, which is the chart.
You,
Sure.
halfway down page 6. Council is responsible for oversight of the organization to ensure effective performance and accountability. Could you please just qualify or clarify the meaning of oversight? What is oversight?
Yeah, this is the, and it is explained in more detail elsewhere, but, you know, the notion of oversight with respect to performance and accountability is this is where your strategic role is really at work. That you are looking down on the organization, and your job is to set the strategic objectives and the goals of the organization. And so that's one part of your role, is to lay that out. Where is the organization headed? Where are the targets that you're headed for? And then the second part of it is to provide the oversight and the accountability around that is actually happening. So, for example, with your financial plan, you would lay out, you know, a 5-year financial plan. Those are the targets. That's where you're headed to. And then your job is annually is to ensure that you are actually carrying out and headed towards those goals, and that you're accountable for that progress. And so that
We're accountable to ensure that we're overseeing that
yes,
progress.
yes. So if, for example, you know, you charge the staff with managing your reserve funds, and you set some targets for those, and that's not happening, then, you know, you're accountable. You got to figure out why that's not happening and make whatever changes are needed to ensure that does happen. Right?
I guess later in the document, you talk about how we would do that as opposed to one single sort of taking issues and themselves.
Well, that is fundamental to this council charter, that you work as a group, you speak with one voice. In terms of directing the work of the organization, you know, you have no effect as individuals. Only the council as a whole can direct the work of the municipality. You all have your individual political voices, but in terms of directing where the resources go in the organization, it's only as a group that you can speak and direct. And so then on page, 7 of your package, the chart, and this is, Bill, again, just back to your question. This is, I created this because I really felt, you know, it's not enough to say that you have oversight and you're accountable, right? It doesn't, the rubber doesn't hit the road then, right? So what does that really mean in practice? So again, I took some guidance from the way the Watson report had made its recommendations and what it identified as being the key roles of the council. So obviously you have a governance role, you have this absolutely essential and critical role of appointment of the city manager, and then you have a corporate strategic planning role, organizational performance role, financial asset and risk management, and this is, you know, this is part of, I think, governance that lots of councils don't really get. Like, you have a huge role in risk management, legal, and, you know, capital asset management. You know, the taxpayers are counting on you guys to keep the risks to the organization at a minimum, or to at least manage those risks and decide, you know, what's tolerable and what's not. And my mind, more than enough for a council to deal with, right? But these are all very high up decisions, strategic decisions, that is really your purview. The staff they're involved in preparing and proposing and recommending these, policies and decisions within these areas, but it's only you that can make the decisions in these areas. You never want the staff making these decisions. They're your decisions. And that requires that you stay up in your view of the organization. So any questions or changes in that? Yeah, okay.
The very last one on the page. Build, maintain, strengthen relationship with citizens, neighboring partners, for instance, sharing frustration. Council reviews and decides just the city manager's reports. That's a very sensitive area for us. And as an example, sometimes I feel that I'm not aware of what staff has discussed at transfer stations. So how does that work? If we are to do what we're supposed to do, going by this, there's much more involved in this council than the city manager than that particular relationship.
Councilor, one of the things that staff is doing on an ongoing basis is continuing to consult with Chenal First Nations because of their emerging role, I guess, in our community. They are very interested in knowing about every possible development that's going on with its road, sewer infrastructure, and so on. So I think a fair amount of staff time, and possibly the city manager may want to elaborate on that, but is spent just interfacing, discussing with them what is happening, and I will just to keep them aware of it, so they're not going to later be disappointed they weren't consulted on. An example would be the four-laning of the bridge at Quarterway, and there was some minor disagreement with Geneva where they felt we should consult before the bridge was built. Our position was that the bridge was simply a replacement for the pre-existing bridge, and so on. And so they are wanting to become more and more involved in these things. And I don't know if staff in Ian in particular would, there's so many myriad of details they're dealing with Geneva on an almost daily basis that to keep up to speed on everything is just part of their responsibility. And that I think would be led by the city manager. And if it was, sorry, I'm just going to say that if there was a gap or a problem or an issue, then he would come to council.
No, and I completely agree with you, and that's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm just trying to think, is this on too restrictive?
Yeah, if I could just, your city manager wants to say something, but I think it's really interesting that you keyed on this one, because I think if there's one thing in this chart that I am not sure that I got completely right, it's this one. And because when I looked at this again yesterday, I looked at a review and decided, I said, well, it's not really. Here, let me just tell you what I intended in this section. This is really, in my mind, this is really your political role. It's your political relationship building. It's not about service provision as much as, you have, and again, this is only council has this role, to interface with these organizations at a kind of political elected official level. And that was what I was trying to capture here. You will make decisions, like if this was about a service agreement with a First Nation, for example, it's a much more straightforward task. The staff would recommend it and you would review and decide. But that's not what I was trying to capture here, so that's, I just am maybe not there yet. Right?
Because I would never be able to seek political support from the city manager in that context. So it's
Yeah.
still something like that.
Yeah, and I agree, so.
So I think,
okay.
I
I think this is through the lens of your governance roles, that this is council to board members, staff to staff. Not, and I think actually your governance, it would be inappropriate for you to have meetings with staff members of the
Right.
Economic Development Corporation,
Right.
with the SFN, with anyone. That would be staff's relationship. And how we would assist you would be to provide you the information that you need to have your relationship built with the elected officials of these other organizations. That's the way I see it.
And that's really like awkward.
And I wouldn't build a relationship, for example, with SFN councilmen. That's not my role.
Right.
That's your.
So what we really need are words other than review and decide, sorry, there, that's, and I'm not sure on that yet. So I think it's Diane and then, no?
Well,
And then
no, I was
Closer.
gonna say that I see the mayor as having more of a role, but you address that, so.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think he would have, he'd spend more time on doing that than the rest of you, but you actually have community, you had a community forum, right? So something like that, that's what I was thinking about. It's about governance to governance, or meeting with the Port Authority as a whole, you know, the board and council, which is a really, really important role of an elected body and can be done by no one else but you, right? So, you know, sorry, Joel.
Sorry. So I just wanted to ensure that I heard it correctly. That individual members of council or members of council outside of the committees that they sit on, it wasn't said that way, should not meet with NEDC or Port Authority or Chamber of Commerce or independent of the committee that is assigned to that interaction? Is that what I just heard? I just want to make sure that's what I heard.
My view on governance would be that it wouldn't be appropriate for council members to sit down with Sasha as an example. That your role is at the board level, and the mayor's relationship with the board chair is where that relationship should happen. My role with Sasha is where that should happen. I think that to me is what the governance model would should be.
Sorry, is that person a staff person? Is that? So that's right. I mean, CAO. So the relationship typically is, you know, board member or elected official to elected official, staff to staff. And for an elected official to meet with a staff of another organization would normally not be seen as appropriate. Now, could you, as individuals, meet with members of the board? I'm sure you do. The only limitation on you is that you can't speak on behalf of council. It's not your role, right? As an individual council member, unless council has given you some kind of authority.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm not suggesting to go to speak to somebody on behalf of the council, obviously.
That's right.
But on behalf of myself as a politician, to gain a greater understanding, to go directly to, you know, I might use names, whatever, to go to Bob Benny and say, hey, Bob, what, hey, Sasha, so, if, hey, John, Lester, like, hey, how you doing, buddy? I see him at an event, and so I can talk to him, but only about how's your kids? Like, and I'm not trying to be, but this is, so, and if I see somebody with somebody in what appears to be a meeting, is it okay for me to ask that person in council, say, hey, what were you doing on the Windward Pub having breakfast with the staffy from NEDC?
Well, I think that that's, well, you know what, in the end, this is for you to decide, right? This will fall on your shoulders. So you have to evaluate the risks and benefits of you know, the choices that you make, right? You as an individual and you as a part of a council. But just the example that you gave, when you see somebody meeting with somebody else at a pub, it raises, raises eyebrows, and there's risks associated with that. It might be entirely, totally innocent, right? On the other hand, it might be interpreted as being not so innocent. And if you have questions of the chair of the board of the Harbor Commission, for example, maybe everybody else on council does too, and maybe that's cause to have a meeting of everybody, right? So, you have to make those choices. Typically, in a governance situation, you would limit that kind of contact. Okay.
I guess, for example, I was a member of the yes committee, but I refrained from attending any of the meetings because I found a real conflict with being a member of that committee and sitting on council. But I think there's got to be some understanding and trust as well. Bill, for example, is close personal friends with members of the SFN community, and has been for years, probably before you were on council. He has regular golf dates for things with his friends, and I don't see that as a problem. And I value some of the friendships I've made on the S committee as well over the years, and I would really be offended if somebody approached me because I was sitting down with somebody who I befriended and probably not talking about something. But anyway.
Well, so there's two parts to that. One is the part, are you talking council business,
Yeah.
right?
So
And
you just have, having a meeting well.
then, so, fine, but you can't avoid, the perception problem, right? And you just have to make a personal choice about that. I have these long friends, I'm going to carry them on, and I'm prepared to take any accusations that are thrown at me that I'm dealing in the background or something like that. I mean, you just have to deal with that, right? But this is about whether or not, on council business, I mean, this is really what this is addresses, because it doesn't necessarily address your personal relationship. It addresses how you relate as a member of council, as an elected official with other organizations. That's what it's trying to focus on. Okay.
And I guess if you do, I can remember being a staff member, and there was the provincial board that I worked for. It would be unnerving, it would have been unnerving to me if one of the board members sort of phoned me and said, I'd like to see you Friday scheduled. That would be quite unnerving to me, unless there was some sort of protocol that had been developed to say each board member is taking several offices and going to meet with the staff and talk to them about something official, right? But just, it would be unnerving, and I think that is that we have to be careful of that, because we might not think that we might think that we can shed our sort of robe of office when we're dealing with certain people, but we can't. And we need to recognize that, because not only is it uncomfortable, I think, I would imagine, for the person who you're setting up the appointments with, but unnerving to people who observe that as well. So, and if you are prepared to be seen, as you said, in that light, where you may be somehow behaving inappropriately to your office, then, you might want to consider whether you want to do that. And there are certain things that happen when you take office that are, it's simply for the board. And so I think those are some of those things, and it's not for someone to guess, they're probably not talking councils.
The mayor
Yeah,
says.
I was just gonna say, I think we may be talking about two different issues. When an individual council, like Councillor Johnson's suggestion, he goes, go out and play golf. To me, that's not a voters thing. If they do or don't get into politics, obviously they shouldn't, possibly they do. I don't think that's a problem if they are caught in their seen the same pressure. Where I draw the line is when, and I think it was actually the city manager's comment, where you have a scheduled meeting in an office, which is entirely different from friends getting together to play golf. I mean, that's, to me, is a non-issue. But I think there is a distinction where you phone up a particular person, particularly a non-governmental person, more in management, and arrange an appointment to discuss what's nothing other than politics and business. And that, I think, gets into the gray area.
So,
Okay,
oh yeah, sorry, Bill.
So, sorry, we're scheduled on, and then trying to get on your part of the Yeah, so I just want to just, so that I get this right. So if I went to Michelle Stillwell's constituency office to meet with her and a party that's opposed to something that we're dealing with, or in favor of, and I walk through that door and sit down with 15, 20 people that are planning how to deal with the issue that city council is going to be dealing with, that would be out of order.
Sorry, this is your MLA that you're talking about? So you would be, you would initiate a meeting like that?
I'm not saying initiated, I'm saying invited to attend it.
Well, and I think it would depend on the role you played in that. So if that was, if you were invited to attend because they felt they could offer you input, like any other constituent phones you up and says, I want to tell you what I think about this issue, I don't see that as a problem.
Because we're talking about
Well, so you-
staffies and higher levels and people
no.
that we should,
So
or we
you-
have to be careful about who we're seeing with when, what we're talking about.
Well, I think, that is my advice to you, plain and simple. I think you always have to think about who you're seeing with and how that might appear to others. I just don't think you can escape that reality. It's your elected officials and that's the way it is, right? But if you're invited to an organization and they want to offer their two bits to you, I think that's just, I would deal with that in the same way that I would deal with any other kind of public input. I would welcome it. If you're there to speak on behalf of council, that's not appropriate, right?
None of my references are an individual councillor unless the mayor has asked you to, speaking on behalf of he or council.
I do think too, I just want to say this about the mayor. The mayor does have a special role in this, right? I mean, we would all expect the mayor to be meeting with the chair of the harbor commission or the chief or something. I would expect that to happen, and that's your role is to speak on behalf of the council, right? So that is a slightly different scenario. So at the
Allison,
moment,
I just want to
Yeah,
clarify in my mind, because I think there's actually more to governance, there's actually protocols, so higher levels of government, when an MLA is requesting presence, it actually, in my opinion, should be the mayor.
or all of council, yeah, and that's what I thought too. I thought, well, if this is,
I don't want Bill to think that, I
Yeah.
don't know if that was this scenario, but
yeah.
anytime an MLA is involved, it should be the mayor or all of council.
Yeah. And you know, if the mayor invited a single,
Or an
or I'm sorry,
Or
if
an MP.
if an MLA invited a single member of council, just one member of council to come to a discussion about a controversial issue, I would think there was something weird about that.
Absolutely.
If they invited all of council or the mayor, or if you were a committee chair, maybe, but if there's just one, I think, would be something about that that would.
I think they're missing the protocol as well if they do that.
Yeah.
Recently, a number of us, and I'm sure all of us, were invited to meet with Sasha Angus, the new head of tourism. So would that be a meeting that I should say to them, well, respectfully, I don't believe as a councillor I should be attending a meeting with you.
So this is a senior.
This was an introductory
Yeah.
meeting to the new manager of tourism
And all of you are invited,
individually.
oh, to meet one-on-one?
Yes.
Okay, and that's interesting. And was the board chair there?
See,
Well,
That she was the CAO, she's the head of,
she's the manager of tourism, and she was alongside the CEO of the Economic Development Corporation.
oh, okay. Well, I mean, you get an invitation like that, if it were me, I'd get an invitation like that, and I think, okay, well, this is bridge building, this is advocating, this is the beginning of a lobbying process, probably, right? And I would, if all of you were invited, all of you were given an opportunity, if it were me, I would probably go and listen intently, not speak as the voice of council. Have a chance to-
Does this direction tell us to do otherwise?
Well, you see, here is what this little column, what this chart says, is that you have a role in relationship building with organizations. I think a better way for what they're doing, and one of my responses might have been this, is to say, we'd love to meet with your new staff person. I'd love the chair of the board to be there and all of council to be there. I think that might be a more appropriate way to make that connection. But I probably wouldn't say no, but I'd be careful. And I would remind myself of what my role was. I mean, these are the realities of it. You didn't initiate it, for one. You know that it's a bit weird. You're asking this question, so you probably thought it was a bit weird.
No, I'm not, I didn't think it was a bit weird, I
You
thought it was
really
normal
normal.
course of duties, but
Yeah.
in relation to the direction we're about to be given by this document, it is weird.
Well,
Because somebody, we know what's going on, but somebody in the future is not. And they're gonna look at this document and go, no, we can't do this, we can't take this meeting, because it's very black and white here.
well, let's clarify what this document says. What this document says is that you have a role. And just how we frame that role, which I'm gonna suggest is something like relationship building. And beyond that, it doesn't tell you what to do or how to behave. So it doesn't tell you this. I'm giving you my advice about it. And the principle here is that you should be dealing, government to government. So the council to the board of directors of the economic development organization. Is there a board?
Yes.
Okay. Or to the board of the First Nations or the board of the Harbor Commission. That's the level where there should be a connection. And that's where you should be trying to connect. And, we both, Ted and I, have offered this caution to you that would not be typical or necessarily beneficial to be meeting with staff or the governance body to be meeting with the staff of another body. That's not ideal. And so my radar would go up and I'd be cautious.
If I can, just a point, I think that the situation, while it was somewhat unusual, the purpose of the meeting was to meet a new employee, a senior employee. I don't find that onerous, unusual maybe, and not consistent with policy maybe, but, there was a reason for it. And I'm differentiating between a welcoming of a new employee and an individual on council who might decide to go out and set up a private meeting with an employee of another organization for whatever
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm not trying to twist this, but that's how we started off in this discussion. Now we've morphed into all kinds of things,
Yeah.
about playing golf and stuff like
Yeah.
that. The focus is, if somebody on council chooses to seek out and make an appointment with somebody in a different capacity and not at a political level, but at an employee level, then there are concerns and the optics aren't good.
So, I could probably write a whole nother piece just on this topic, and we haven't done that.
There is another half to my question.
Okay, so to try and bring this discussion back to this document, I would just ask you, do you see this as part of your role? That you have this governance, relationship building role as kind of laid out in this chart? And which the city manager supports, and then on the left-hand column, we put, rather than review and decide, we put something like relationship building. The other alternative is we could take this line out entirely.
I was Bill, if you don't mind, I was gonna suggest that this is giving us a bit of a problem, a bit of a problem. I can see that, and there's a lot of, sort of, confusion around it. And this would be one of the amendments, perhaps, if we go that route, that either we separate and discuss it later, or we do what Allison says, or we, whatever we want to do with it. But I'd hate to see this get sidetracked or
Yeah.
turned down because of this particular, and I can see all these points. I mean, Bill brings up very good points about meeting people and so on and so forth. So, and Allison has come up with some suggestions, so I'm just gonna put that in there, or throw that out there.
Yeah, sorry, Bill.
So early on in our term, one of the issues we had to deal with was the potential to, or, in fact, was to grant a different and an increased level of funding to the Port Theatre. I didn't completely understand the intricacies of the contract we had with the Port Theatre. And I don't recall how it actually came up when I met with the manager of the Port Theatre to learn more, to understand, what their goals are and their dreams and their ambitions going into the future. And how does this actually work? Could I have had that meeting under these rules?
Well, I think a meeting like that would probably have been better if it'd been in front of all of council, because surely there were other members of council that shared your questions, and it quite likely ought to have been done in public. You might have considered having a conversation with the chair of the board, but I think if you have such fundamental questions about clearly a very important piece of business, that's business, your council business,
Well,
that it probably should have been done.
yeah, but my point was, being a new member of council, one of two new members of council,
Yeah.
all of my colleagues know all about this place, as far as I know. So, as a new member, I just wanted to find out, learn more, that's
Yeah.
all.
The other alternative, well, I still, my response is still the same. The other response is that that's what the city manager is for too. So you have a relationship with the city manager, and he ought to have that information, so that's where I probably would have gone. Because you just have to be aware that any external agency is dealing with this council as a whole, and you really need to act as a whole. And, be sensitive to a divide and conquer strategy, which is going to be a part of your everyday life. So Bill, I'll take your question, and then I'd like to suggest that we move on in some way. We either find a way to reframe this, or so that we get to the other part of it too.
So I think Phil's question is really important. It goes to so many different layers for all of us. We just recently approved purchase of a significant amount of properties, a significant growth.
Yes.
And I visited, and I know most people probably did, independently, with friends of Lindley Valley. And walked with them many times, and sat in their houses, and had coffee, went to coffee shops, and walked the property again, in different seasons, and all that stuff. So am I hearing it correctly? And then I heard on the very onset of this meeting that about preparation, about knowing what it is that you're gonna be talking about. And so there's always three sides to every story and every request and every, so if I don't have the ability as a politician to investigate or inquire or research more than one opinion, because, gee, God forbid, friends of Lindley Valley influences my decision. So what I'm hearing is that I shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't be going to the Bethlehem retreat on Arbit Road and talking with them, whether it's by email or on a phone or in public.
I think what you're confusing is the difference between input and, public input, which I expect all of you are committed to. right? So the difference between that and the difference between organizations with which you do business. And I see them as being quite distinct. So, if you're dealing with, and the number of them are listed here, right? If you're dealing with partner organizations, like the Port Authority or you're gonna have to sort of decide for yourself whether or not this is an appropriate conversation. And, you know, this document does not lay out any rules or guidelines for how you make these decisions. This discussion that we're having right now is quite apart from what we're dealing with here. And that's why I'm gonna suggest we kind of move on. But I would encourage you to think about this and think about how you want to operate in this realm. And Bill, your characterization that you're being told not to talk to people is just not on. It's not accurate. Nobody's telling you not to. It's about giving you some advice based on my personal political experience and the point of view of the city manager. And you'll have to work this out for yourself.
Sure.
So shall we remove this, or shall I
Leave it in.
put something instead of review and decide, because I completely agree that this is not on. I could add something like, you know, relationship building, or I could just take that out and leave external relations, just leave the center column and not put anything in the left-hand column. I could do that. And then when you consider this at council, you could have another kick at this, if you give it some thought. Too restrictive. So how would I do that? Anything else about that document? Then we'll move on to, move on to the role of council document. So again, these sections in this box are all quotes out of the community charter. I wouldn't expect you would make any changes in that area. And then there are quotes out of the Watson report, which if you wanted me to take them out, I could, but I thought they were both good descriptions of what governance, the difference between governance and management. The only other thing that I wanted to just draw your attention to is in the community charter box, when you sign your oath at the beginning of your term, you swear to operate consistent with the laws, including the charter. And I just wanted to note, because I think it's germane, that you're swearing that you will contribute to the development and evaluation of policies and programs in the municipality. And then C says, you're swearing that you will participate in council meetings, committee meetings, and meetings of other bodies to which the member is appointed. And so, you know, if you're choosing not to attend a meeting because you don't agree with what's going on, you're actually breaching your oath, because what the oath asks of you is that you will be there to represent both the positive, you're supporting an initiative, or to represent the opposing initiative. And it's really important that you actually, you know, when you swear the oath, that you take that seriously. If you're opposing something that's before the council, then you have an obligation to voice that opposition, because undoubtedly you're representing members of the community. So just opting out of a meeting is really, in my view, it's a breach of oath. So on page 8 of your package, is there anything there that you wanted to change or amend or?
So if I didn't attend today, because clearly I was that seventh person on that summary that you did, and I made that claim about 2 months ago, that was me. Because I don't mean the survey monkey doesn't know who it is, but I said it was me. So I'm here. So if I wasn't here, would the assumption be that Bill must not be here because he doesn't agree with this? So that's why he's not
I think,
So who at the end of the day says, well, I'm gonna call out Bestwood on that, not coming to that meeting, because, you know, he was that survey monkey guy that didn't support this. And that must be why he's not here, so shame on him. And the optics and the perception is, for my opinion, is that's why he's not here. So, let's send Bill down to the principal's office on this one, and let's get that file started.
I think that that's why it's important when you don't attend a meeting, and this is included in the performance expectations, that's why it's important to offer some explanation. You know, I have a doctor's appointment, I'm out of town, and to offer some explanation, and I think that that's why the practice normally is that you do that. That you offer some explanation of why you're not at a meeting, because you've actually sworn an oath that says you aren't gonna be at that meeting. And so, all of us know that you can't attend every meeting, and there are good reasons for that. And so that's why you offer an explanation. And usually, like in today's case, you, at the beginning of the meeting, acknowledge that George wasn't here because he had commitments that he had to attend to. And if that is a message to the public, your public who've elected you, of why you're not at the meeting. So I would just recommend that you carry on with that practice. That's good practice. So anything on page 8?
No,
Yeah.
just 8 is the one at the bottom of my.
On the hand, oh yeah, so,
But it does say 8, well, that's just 7.
yeah, it says 8 on your agenda package, so you've got electronic, so maybe
He
it's.
showed you the wrong one.
At the very top, it says role of counselor, and that's maybe the easiest one to follow electronically. Page 9 then. And I just, at the top of this page where it's, oh, sorry. Scroll down here. Where it says here, the role of council is to contribute to the initiation, deliberation, decision-making related to the key areas of council responsibility. And again, this is language drawn out of the Watson report. So setting appropriations, strategic direction, allocating resources, managing risks, and oversight and reporting. So you see that, I mean, there's a structure to these documents that's repeated. I've tried hard to repeat them consistently. And then the performance expectations begin on that page and carry on to the next page. So governance, and then meeting preparation, conduct in meetings. And then relationships section, and you'll see that I've taken another excerpt out of the community charter, which talks about the authority of the presiding member and then expulsion from meetings. So Bill, you had asked earlier about kind of what kind of disciplinary action, or how do you actually, find a way to put this into action. That part of the charter is clearly relevant for both the public and for members of the council. I hasten to say that I've only seen one, maybe 2 examples of that in my time as a government, where somebody's actually been expelled. I have called the police, but usually as soon as the police walk in, things calm down.
We've had police in our meetings before.
Yeah, it has a tempering effect.
Undercover.
Yeah, Diane.
Do you call the police about some behavior that was in the gallery or actually at the table?
No, in the gallery.
Okay.
But, council members have been expelled, not on my councils, but on other councils. I mean, it has happened. I mean, it's totally legit. You just hope it never gets to that point, right? So relationships with the mayor, relations with other councilors, relations with staff. The Watson report specifically said they wanted a reference made to conflicts of interest and confidentiality. So I have referenced here your 2 documents, which council has adopted, right? to conflict of interest documents, of course, all of the charter rules apply as well, and then the confidentiality. And then there is a discussion of the consequences of breaches of the performance expectation. This goes back to this theme of self-governance, that you need to manage this yourselves. And, you know, the theme of this is that you need to actively manage this. You need to be, all of you, not just the mayor or the chair, all of you need to be aware and be watching for when things go sideways on the council. Sorry, Bill.
The confidentiality, particularly when it comes from in camera. I've seen a couple of situations of late where we have made a decision in camera. Activity has started as a result of that decision that we made in camera. And notwithstanding the fact that there were notations on the subject matter that the information about this project would be made public upon a certain event taking place.
Right.
The event took place.
Yeah.
And then when I get a call from a citizen wanting to talk about the project, I say, well, I can't talk about the project because I've been advised that the making public of the information will not happen until next quarter. For the end of the quarter, when we do our quarterly
Right.
releases of
Right.
the information.
Right.
We had another one recently where there were decisions made in camera. We came out of that meeting and there was a big press release on the decision that was made in camera. Yet, all kinds of different aspects of how we got to the decision, input information was not released. So people are bombarding you with questions about it. You're going, well, I don't think I can answer that one because that hasn't been released yet. I can answer this one, but I can't,
So.
It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, so, if I understand the detail of your question correctly, you are not to release, this is black and white. Black and white, there's no discussion about this. You are not to release any information unless council has agreed that it's going to be released, period. Period, and you're clearly in breach of the provincial statutes if you do, and you're liable for that. And you're liable for any injury that's caused. So you can be personally, financially liable if something goes sideways, like on a property purchase or something. Like you could really mess up, right? So you are not, black and white, you're not to release anything. If, maybe you're feeling your way through this process because it sounds like maybe council wasn't, maybe didn't make quite the right motions about what to release and what not to release. And maybe you need to work on that part of it so that you make it not so difficult, that you find yourself in a situation where you can release one part and not the other, right? So that's about a decision-making process because all of the authority and power lies at this table. So you guys decide what you release and what you don't release. And maybe you need to get better at that. Guillermo?
So just for information of council, we have two processes of releasing information. One is, Councilor McKay mentioned the quarterly review of in-camera information. That's a process that is an ongoing basis.
Okay.
However, any council meeting, council can choose,
Right.
like Alison just described it, to make that information available right on the spot. We implemented that for about 4 or 5 months ago. So at the end of the discussion happening in camera, the council considers that it's done and over with. Now council can choose to say, I make a motion to release all in-camera information given privacy concerns and so forth that will be served, then the staff will go on and put that information on the website.
And if there's confusion about that, Guillermo, is it your practice for the council to call the city manager or to call a staff member to clarify, say, gee, I can't remember what we did here, can I release this, can I, there's a way to resolve that?
Absolutely. I mean, we get questions from council members legislatively, so you can call us and we'll make you aware of what the process is for that specific purpose.
I think Ted just wanted to say something, come back to the other guy. No? Oh, sorry.
Good discussion. Can we have a break?
So can I just ask,
Yeah.
Bill, so was that helpful, that
No,
discussion?
no, because in this particular case, we had voted to purchase a piece of property,
Yeah,
and it was clearly noted in the document that we were looking at, that the information on this purchase and the project associated with the purchase
yeah,
would move ahead, the information would be released upon the registration and land titles.
right,
Well, that obviously took place because we commenced work on the property that we purchased.
right.
However, when somebody else called and said, I want to know more about this,
Yeah,
I said, I can't talk to you about it because it's not going to be, the details of it are not going to be released until the quarterly release.
right. Well, so that was the right response.
That's an awkward position to be in.
Yeah, well, this is, you know what, when the public calls you and asks you about information that's been discussed in camera, it is awkward, it is always awkward, because here, it might be some completely innocuous little piece of information, but it's not for you to judge to release it. It's for council to judge to release it, and it's a crappy situation to be in, right, to say, you know, Joe Public calls up and wants to know something, you say, I'm sorry, that was an in-camera matter, and I'm not in a position to release this information. Now, at the next council meeting, you could come back and say, I'd like to pass a motion that we can release them.
Well, the problem is that the community is seeing the bulldozers working on the property that we purchased.
Yeah. Well,
Well, what's this about? I'm sorry, I can't tell you what this is
Yeah.
about.
but that's a flaw in the process, right?
Right.
So at some point, again, I don't pretend to understand the detail of this, but at some point, the decision about when to release the information was not clear enough, or was not responsive enough. And that's a problem, not with in-camera information. It's a problem with the process of how the information was released. So that's where I would do that. Okay, do you want a break, 10-minute break?
Are we gonna have enough time to finish it? We have 25 minutes left.
No, we go to
Till
noon.
noon.
Oh, to do, I'm sorry.
We'll get better at this.
Sure, okay.
Five-minute
Okay,
break.
so yeah.